Hello, my name is Damoon. I chose the question for the debate. Was the storming and attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021 an act of terrorism on U.S. soil? And I answered yes. The storming and attack of the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021 was an act of terrorism on U.S. soil. And I thought about the definition of terrorism. So I looked at multiple places, and the Department of Defense Dictionary of Military Terms defines terrorism as the calculated use of unlawful violence or threat of unlawful violence to inculcate fear intended to coerce or intimidate governments or societies in the pursuit of goals that are generally political, religious, or ideological. Then I found another definition from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The FBI defines domestic terrorism as violent criminal acts which are committed by individuals and or groups in order to further ideological goals stemming from domestic influences, such as those of a political, religious, social, racial, or environmental nature. The Oxford Dictionary says that terrorism is the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. So I want everyone to just think about those words, especially political and ideological in the case of this debate. And so I wanted to talk about a couple of the facts before the attack started and during the attack. So on Wednesday, January 6, 2021, the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. was stormed during a riot and a violent attack against the U.S. Congress. A mob of supporters of President Donald Trump attempted to overturn his defeat in the 2020 presidential election by disrupting the joint session of Congress assembled to count electoral votes to formalize President-elect Joe Biden's victory. The Capitol complex was locked down and lawmakers and staff were evacuated while rioters occupied and vandalized the building for several hours. 5 people died either shortly before, during, or after the events. 1 was shot by Capitol Police, 1 died of a drug overdose, and 3 succumbed to natural causes. More than 140 people were injured. Why did this happen? Called to action by Trump, thousands of his supporters gathered in Washington, D.C. on January 5 and 6 in support of his false claim that the 2020 election had been stolen from him, and to demand that Vice President Mike Pence and Congress reject Biden's victory. Starting at noon on January 6 at a Save America rally, Trump repeated false claims of election irregularities and said, "If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore." During and after his speech, thousands of attendees walked to the Capitol and hundreds breached police perimeters as Congress was beginning the electoral vote count. Many in the crowd broke into the building, occupying, vandalizing, and looting it for several hours. They assaulted Capitol Police officers and reporters, erected a mock gallows on the Capitol grounds, and attempted to locate lawmakers to capture and harm. Some rioters chanted "Hang Mike Pence" after Pence's rejection of false claims by Trump and others that the vice president should or could overturn the election results. Some vandalized and looted the offices of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi as well as of those of members of Congress. Here's a couple of pictures of the rioters and the Trump supporters during the riot. What happened next? With building security breached, Capitol Police evacuated the Senate and House of Representative chambers. Several buildings in the Capitol complex were evacuated and all were locked down. Rioters occupied and ransacked the empty Senate chamber, while federal law enforcement officers drew handguns to defend the evacuated House floor. Pipe bombs were found at the offices of the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee, and Molotov cocktails were discovered in a vehicle near the Capitol. Trump resisted sending the D.C. National Guard to subdue the mob. Then, numerous public figures called unsuccessfully for Trump to intervene until shortly after President-elect Joe Biden at 4:06 p.m. implored Trump to call off his supporters. At 4:17 p.m. in a Twitter video, Trump asserted that the election was fraudulent, but told his supporters to go home in peace. The Capitol was cleared of rioters by mid-evening, and the counting of the electoral votes resumed and was completed in the early morning hours of January 7. Pence declared President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris victors and affirmed that they would assume office on January 20th. Pressured by his administration, the threat of removal, and numerous resignations, Trump later committed to an orderly transition of power in a televised statement. Why is it terrorism? The FBI classified the attack as domestic terrorism, and the Congressional Research Service also concluded that the attack appeared to meet the federal definition of domestic terrorism. Words in the media use riot, rally, coup, and insurrection. When you look at the definition of terrorism, the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. So that's basically you put those things together with ideology and political ideas, and they attack the Capitol. So that would mean that it is terrorism. These rioters used arms and they had explosives to cause harm, but they didn't use explosives. They had coordinated a plan of attack to hurt the political establishment as well as politicians in the building. Using the reasoning of ideologies in a political sense, these domestic terrorists stormed the Capitol. The event was the most severe assault on the building since the 1814 burning of Washington by the British Army during the War of 1812. Law professor and scholar of legal history Carlton F.W. Larson wrote that the framers of the Constitution would have denounced the event as a treasonous act. FBI Director Christopher Wray stated during congressional hearings that the Bureau considered the 2021 United States Capitol attack to be an instance of domestic terrorism. Even the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson condemned the disgraceful scenes. He also said the United States stands for democracy around the world, and it is now vital that there should be a peaceful and orderly transfer of power. Thank you for listening to my debate.